What happens when the lights vanish from an entire capital, and it is no accident? Imagine the heart of a nation plunging into darkness, not by the random hand of fate, but by the deliberate stroke of war. On the night of October 27th, the cities of Kyiv and Odesa were thrust into a new, terrifying reality. It was a night that will be etched into the memory of every Ukrainian. Explosions split the silence, flames devoured key landmarks, and two of Ukraine's greatest cities disappeared beneath a wave of rolling blackouts. In minutes, what was once familiar, the glow of streetlights, the hum of electric trains, the reassuring presence of heat and power, was gone, replaced by shadow and the distant thunder of war. This was no accident, no isolated event. It was an orchestrated act of aggression. On that night, dozens, perhaps even hundreds, of drones and missiles swept across the sky in tightly coordinated waves. These were not blind barrages. Every weapon had a purpose. Every target was chosen with precision. The air defense systems, which had guarded millions with ever-increasing skill and innovation, found themselves stretched to their absolute limit. The sky itself became a battlefield, lit by the flashes of anti-aircraft fire and the ominous streaks of incoming missiles. For hours, the heavens flickered with the signs of conflict, each burst of light a silent warning that Ukraine's most vital lifelines were under attack. Civilians huddled in basements, corridors, and subway stations, watching as the comforts and securities of normal life burned away before their eyes. In the chaos, rumors swirled. Had secret NATO-linked bunkers been hit? Were foreign mercenaries among the casualties of the firestorm? Was this the opening blow of an even more devastating offensive? Social media erupted in a frenzy of speculation, with shaky videos and panicked voices documenting the night's devastation. Yet beneath the noise, one truth stood out. Kyiv, Odesa, and every other city under fire would never be the same again. This was not just a crisis. It was a turning point. All of this unfolded under the shadow of a chilling ultimatum from Vladimir Putin. 72 hours to respond or face consequences. The very real threat of escalation hung over every hour, magnifying the dread and urgency that gripped the nation. When a nation is stripped of light and security overnight, the consequences are immediate and profound. Hospitals, the sanctuaries of the sick and wounded, falter as backup generators struggle under the load or fail altogether. Transportation grinds to a halt. Trains stop on darkened tracks, traffic lights flicker out, and ambulances must pick their way through streets shrouded in darkness. Panic is contagious. As people scramble for news, for safety, and for supplies, the fragile social order begins to fray. In moments like these, a country's fate, and perhaps much more, hangs by a thread as thin as a wire in a severed power grid. This is not merely a story of bombs and blackouts. It is the opening chapter of a new, punishing phase of warfare, one in which supply lines, energy, and morale transform into weapons as powerful as any missile. The world has seen such tactics before. In World War II, the German blitz on London sought not only to destroy infrastructure, but to break the will of the British people. In the Gulf War, coalition forces targeted Iraq's power plants and bridges to sap the regime's endurance. Now, in Ukraine, the same grim logic is at work. If you cannot win by arms alone, you attack the very systems that let a society function. This was not just another air raid. This was a deliberate, multi-pronged offensive, engineered to overwhelm, paralyze, and intimidate. Across Ukraine, the scale and precision of the barrage were unlike anything seen in recent memory. Military analysts have dubbed this a campaign of deep battle. Not content with fighting at the front, Russia has taken the war to the rear, to the very arteries that sustain resistance. The goal is to make life so difficult, so unpredictable, that the will to fight is slowly bled away. The targets were chosen with ruthless logic: energy facilities, military outposts, ammunition depots, and critical logistics hubs. Imagine Kyiv's dense city center, with its iconic skyline, suddenly darkened and silent. In Odesa, the great port, a gateway to the world, became a battlefield as fires raged and ships sat idle. The attacks came in carefully timed waves. First, drones swept in, probing for weak spots and mapping out the defenses. They forced air defense crews to reveal their positions and expend their precious missiles. Then, as defenders scrambled to reload, a second, deadlier wave of precision-guided missiles homed in on those newly exposed vulnerabilities. It was a strategy reminiscent of the reconnaissance strike complex developed during the Cold War by both NATO and the Soviet Union, where intelligence and firepower are fused for maximum effect. Critical infrastructure bore the brunt. Hydroelectric plants, vital for both electricity and regulating rivers, exploded into fireballs. Oil depots and gas terminals, essential for heating homes and fueling vehicles, erupted in flames. Railway lines, the veins of military logistics, twisted and melted in the heat. Within hours, great infernos lit the night sky, casting an eerie glow over silent neighborhoods. Rolling blackouts and water shortages rippled out across entire regions, leaving millions in limbo. The blackout was not just physical, it was psychological, a calculated strike at both the willpower of the people and the machinery of war. Ukraine's air defense forces, long celebrated for their grit and ingenuity, found themselves overwhelmed. Until now, they had maintained impressive interception rates, sometimes shooting down as many as 9 in 10 incoming threats. On this night, that rate plummeted. There were simply too many targets, too many warheads, arriving too quickly for any one system to handle. Social media filled with haunting images, warehouses consumed by fire, explosions illuminating the darkness, entire city blocks reduced to ghostly quiet. In the words of one local official, "We have never seen anything like this, not since the earliest days of the war." Publicly, officials hailed the heroism of their defenders. Privately, they admitted the truth. The shield had been breached. The sheer volume and tempo of the assault had exposed dangerous gaps. It is a lesson as old as war itself. In the Battle of Britain, even the world's best air defense network could be saturated if the enemy pressed hard enough. The stakes today are existential. With power grids burning, fuel stocks dwindling, and supply routes shattered, the disruption threatens not just the war effort, but the very rhythm of daily life. Hospitals cannot operate MRI machines or ventilators. Waterworks grind to a halt, leaving entire neighborhoods without drinking water or sanitation. Railroads, the arteries of both commerce and military supply, are paralyzed. Each outage compounds the strain, multiplying the risk of humanitarian catastrophe. As dawn pierced the haze and the fires smoldered, one thing was clear. These attacks were no random outbursts, but the opening salvo of a campaign designed to exhaust, disable, and demoralize an entire nation. The chaos of this night is only the beginning. If history is any guide, think of the months-long siege of Leningrad or the relentless bombings of Belgrade during the Kosovo conflict. Such campaigns are meant to drag on, grinding down resistance until something breaks. But as Ukraine reeled from this overwhelming assault, a chilling question hung over the nation. How much more can its defenses and its people endure? And what comes next if the pressure only intensifies? The true objective now is not simply to destroy, but to grind down Ukraine's capacity and resolve to fight. This is a war of attrition, waged not only on the battlefield, but in the daily lives of millions. Russian sources described attacks unfolding in deliberate waves. First, small-scale strikes probe the defenses, searching for cracks. Next, the assault intensifies, each new barrage honing in on fresh weaknesses. The aim is relentless, to squeeze Ukraine's defenses tighter and tighter, night after night, until they snap. Territory, once the main prize in war, is no longer the focus. Instead, the campaign is aimed squarely at the systems that allow a country to resist: energy grids, air defenses, logistics networks. Major cities, Kyiv, Odesa, Kharkiv, are plunged into darkness as rolling blackouts sweep the land. Daily life is transformed. People charge phones from car batteries, heat meals over makeshift stoves, and gather in dimly lit rooms to share news and comfort. The resilience that once seemed so unbreakable is now being tested in every home, every neighborhood. Nowhere is the pressure more intense than at the ports. Odesa and Ismail, lifelines for both humanitarian aid and vital exports, have been targeted with surgical precision. Disrupting these hubs does more than delay military resupply. It severs Ukraine's ties to the outside world, deepening both isolation and fear. When ports fall silent, so too do the hopes of millions who rely on international support. The resource drain is punishing. Each night of bombardment burns through reserves of fuel, ammunition, and critical equipment. Fires rage at power plants, blackouts lengthen, and the strain on air defense operators mounts. Even the most advanced systems, like the German-supplied Iris-T or the American Patriot, can intercept only so many threats before they are depleted or in need of repair. This is the dilemma faced by every defender in history, from London's anti-aircraft gunners during the Blitz to the Iraqi operators in the Gulf War. Technology alone cannot guarantee survival if the enemy's resources are vast and relentless. On the front lines, exhaustion eclipses any notion of territorial gain. Reports have emerged of Ukrainian units pulling back to more defensible positions, using rivers and marshes as natural barriers against encirclement. The near trap at Pokrovsk is a grim warning. A failed defense there could mean not just lost ground, but the loss of entire brigades, hundreds, even thousands of soldiers. It is a scenario reminiscent of the encirclements at Stalingrad during World War II, or the desperate withdrawals from the Chosin Reservoir in Korea, where survival depended on finding defensible ground in the face of overwhelming odds. The conflict is escalating in force as well. The use of massive bombs, like the 3-ton FAB-3000, signals a willingness to obliterate positions regardless of the cost in collateral damage. Each detonation is a message. The longer this war drags on, the more devastating the price will be for everyone involved. This is total war in the 21st century, where no target is truly safe. If this war of attrition succeeds, the consequences will be severe. Shortages of fuel and ammunition could cripple both military and civilian supply lines. Morale, the invisible glue that holds societies together, could collapse, leading to mass displacement, economic freefall, and even political upheaval. The collapse of infrastructure would ripple outward, undermining not just the ability to fight, but the very hope of a better future. History offers sobering parallels. In the final months of World War II, German cities were reduced to ruins, and the will to resist crumbled under the weight of deprivation and despair. In Sarajevo, during the Balkan Wars, years of siege left a once prosperous city on the brink of starvation and chaos. In this new phase, the front is everywhere, on power lines, on highways, in city squares. The question now is how long Ukraine can withstand the unrelenting pressure. What happens when no side can land a decisive blow, but every night brings fresh losses, new risks, and growing uncertainty? Across Ukraine, rolling blackouts now shape daily life. Cities like Kyiv and Odesa slip into darkness for hours at a stretch. Hospitals, homes, and schools must ration every watt of electricity, while water pumps and heating systems stall, leaving entire neighborhoods shivering in frozen silence. The city that once never slept is now forced to hibernate, holding its breath for the next wave of attacks. On the front lines near Pokrovsk and Mirnograd, the dangers go far beyond enemy fire. Soldiers gamble not only with their lives, but with dwindling stocks of food, ammunition, and power. Every resupply becomes a race against time, as roads are bombed or blocked, and the threat of encirclement grows with each passing day. The stories echo those of Leningrad, where ration cards and ingenuity meant the difference between life and death. Western support continues. Advanced air defenses, drones, and vital ammunition pour in from the United States, Europe, and beyond. Yet hardware cannot replace lost time or exhausted crews. Even the most sophisticated system is useless if the grid fails, or if its operators are too fatigued to respond. The greatest technology on Earth is powerless without the people, energy, and morale to sustain it. Moscow's campaign is relentless and calculated. The aim is not merely to seize territory, but to grind down Ukrainian resolve. One blackout, one broken pipeline, one sleepless night at a time. By turning the nation's infrastructure into a battlefield, each strike aims to make essential services into vulnerabilities, to convince the people that recovery is out of reach. This is the logic of hybrid warfare. Defeating your opponent by 1,000 cuts, rather than a single blow. Military analysts describe this as a war of rhythm, a struggle not just for ground, but for tempo. Control the tempo, and you control the initiative. The goal is to keep the adversary staggering, off balance, until their supplies snap, their cities falter, and their will to resist finally surrenders. It is a strategy as old as Sun Tzu, who wrote that, "All warfare is based on deception and speed, but now waged with 21st century weapons and tactics." Yet the true cost is not measured only in land lost or gained. If power plants fail and water stops flowing, millions could face a humanitarian disaster. Disease, mass displacement, and economic collapse threaten to engulf entire regions, while political instability creeps ever closer. The specter of a displaced, desperate population is not new. Think of the millions displaced in Syria, the Balkans, or World War II. But the scale, in a country as large and interconnected as Ukraine, could be unprecedented. In the end, the fate of millions does not rest on a single battle, but on which side's infrastructure, logistics, and determination collapse first. This is a contest of survival, measured blackout by blackout, day by day, hour by hour. The world is watching to see whether Ukraine's legendary resilience can hold out against the most relentless campaign of attrition Europe has seen in decades. Now, as winter deepens and the nights grow longer, both sides are forced to adapt, or risk collapse. The next phase will test not just armies, but the resilience of entire societies. In World War II, the Russians learned to survive winters with little heat or food. In the Balkans, ordinary people rebuilt shattered cities by hand. In Ukraine, the coming months will see similar tests of ingenuity and courage. When the grid collapses and habitual rhythms dissolve, adaptation becomes the difference between hardship and survival. Across Ukraine, as city skylines fade into shadow and the steady hum of heaters is replaced by brittle silence, people respond with instinct and ingenuity. What once gathered dust, batteries, candles, old analog radios, now become lifelines. The new priority is not comfort, but continuity. Finding ways to charge phones, keep warm, and share news when every convenience is suddenly precarious. Daily life is reshaped by air raid sirens and emergency curfews. Officials ration electricity, water, and fuel, enforcing blackouts to shield fragile systems from collapse. Improvisation becomes second nature. Neighbors pool generators, families cook over flashlights, entire apartment blocks organized to share dwindling supplies. Every act of cooperation is a small act of defiance. In Kyiv, community centers have become warming hubs where people gather for soup and news. In Odesa, volunteers deliver batteries and lanterns to the elderly. In the suburbs, farmers teach city dwellers how to store food without refrigeration, a skill that saved countless lives in the blockaded cities of the past. But not all defenses are made of steel or sandbags. Social bonds, clear communication, and the tenacious will to endure become as essential as any bunker. Trust between neighbors, the ability to organize under pressure, and the strength to support the vulnerable can decide who outlasts the longest, coldest nights. Sociologists who studied London during the Blitz found that neighborhoods with the strongest social ties endured the nightly bombings with the least breakdown in morale. In Ukraine today, a shared thermos of tea or a whispered joke in the darkness is a barrier against despair. For leaders and policymakers, the lesson is immediate and stark. Underestimating the grinding impact of attritional warfare risks unraveling entire cities. Infrastructure is more than wires or pipes. It is the scaffolding that holds morale and order in place. Failing to invest in resilience, backup systems, and rapid repairs can leave any city, anywhere, dangerously exposed. In Japan, after the Kobe earthquake, those communities with robust emergency plans and stockpiles recovered the fastest. The same is true in war. Preparation buys time, and time buys survival. For ordinary citizens, vigilance and preparation become acts of influence, not just caution. Understanding the logic behind these relentless attacks empowers communities to anticipate and adapt, sometimes before the next strike comes. Stocking essentials, knowing evacuation routes, keeping communication lines open. These are practical steps that can tip the balance between chaos and collective strength. An alert, ready society is far harder to break. In Israel, decades of conflict have taught citizens to keep emergency kits and to practice drills. In Ukraine, similar habits are now being adopted, one family at a time. Globally, observers must look beyond shifting battle maps and headlines. The war's new front runs through power plants, water mains, and supply lines. Attacks on infrastructure are about more than lost electricity. They aim to erode the will to resist, targeting civilian morale as much as military capacity. Recognizing these patterns is crucial, not only for understanding Ukraine's fight, but for grasping how modern conflict is evolving everywhere. In a world where cyber attacks can plunge entire regions into darkness and drones strike from unexpected angles, every nation must rethink what it means to be prepared. Failing to absorb these lessons could leave any community exposed to the next crisis. Hybrid threats that strike at both the physical and psychological foundations of daily life. The darkness may have barely lifted, and yet the next wave of challenges is already gathering. The urgent choice ahead: will resilience or exhaustion define the coming days? In Finland, where the threat of invasion has shaped national policy for decades, every home is required to have a bomb shelter. In Ukraine, the need for such foresight is now being learned the hard way. As the nights stretch on and uncertainty grows, the need for adaptation reaches everyone, from frontline defenders to families sheltering in darkness. The next act of this conflict will reveal how courage and ingenuity can reshape what survival means. It is not just about enduring the darkness, but about finding new ways to bring back the light. If you think war is only fought along the front lines, look again, before darkness falls for good. The images from Kyiv and Odesa are not just headlines. They are a warning to the world. In modern war, the real targets are the silent lifelines, power grids, fuel depots, supply routes, and the fragile systems that make daily life possible. From New York to Tokyo, from London to São Paulo, no city is immune to the vulnerabilities now on display in Ukraine. This is attrition warfare, 21st century style. Here, the battle is not only for ground, but for the ability to function, to communicate, to heal, to keep the lights burning. Every missile, every drone, is not just aimed at a building, but at morale, infrastructure, and the thin fabric holding communities together. In the words of Winston Churchill, "We shape our buildings, and afterwards, our buildings shape us." In Ukraine today, the destruction of buildings is reshaping lives in ways that will echo for generations. Last night's strikes broke more than glass. They delivered a message. Survival itself is now the contest. How long can cities endure rolling blackouts? How fast can defenses adapt when the next assault may come from any direction, at any hour? The answers will determine not just the outcome of this war, but the future of how societies everywhere prepare for the unexpected. If we judge this conflict only by territory lost or reclaimed, we miss what truly matters. The real toll is the slow draining of resources, the fuel that powers ambulances, the wires that connect families, the routes that deliver bread and medicine. These are not far-off problems. They expose the soft underbelly of every society. In Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, it was the loss of power, not the storm itself, that caused the greatest suffering. In Ukraine, the lesson is unfolding in real time. Understanding this new phase is no longer a choice, but a necessity. Societies that fail to grasp the rules of attrition risk being caught off guard, not just by sudden blasts, but by the steady erosion of resilience. The only defense is clear-eyed awareness and preparation before the next blackout tests us all. This is not just Ukraine's battle, but a warning for a world where the front lines are everywhere. The war's future will not be decided by armies alone. Communities, families, and everyday routines are now on the front line. The question is no longer just who holds the ground, but who can endure when the lights flicker, again and again. The world has a choice, to learn from the darkness or to be consumed by it.